cost you about $500,000 to fund. Now, that's just comfortable, but worryingly, many Australians, many, are looking at a lot less than that in their super funds. Now, to make it worse, the projections are based on the premise that a person will draw an annual income of about 37 grand and live to about 90 or so. So in a nutshell, it's not an income to provide the dream retirement lifestyle. It's just a comfortable one, all right? So you can't do anything special. Now, while this is all happening, Westpac research has discovered, you ready for this figure? Nearly $19 billion in superannuation is lying idle in about 6 million superannuation accounts. Joining me in the studio to try and make sense of life, money, you name it, the founder of Your Family, Your Money, Wilson Luna. Hello, mate.
G'day, Tim. How are you?
What are all those people doing at Costco if we're doing it tough?
Yeah, that's a good call, actually. Good question, isn't it? Absolutely.
I mean, there's a traffic jam in Auburn because of people at the Costco shop. Now, this super thing, let's talk about the fact that we need a lot more money in super in a minute, but nearly 19 billion lying around just not being retrieved by anybody, that must be old. Is it?
Yeah, well, it is generally, and it comes down to the old thing of, as Australians, we've had it pretty good for the last couple of decades. So, unfortunately, we only really refer to that money when we're close to retirement.
Yeah.
We leave it there and we don't really think about it until we get close, and then we work out, have we got enough to retire or not? And unfortunately, some stats are coming out as well that are saying that, on average, 55 to 64-year-olds, males have got an average 114,000 in theirs, and females, unfortunately, have got half of that.
Yeah, I thought it was less than that. So, it's 114. That's not going to get you there.
No, especially with the stats you just sort of read out, the 500,000 isn't enough at times, so it's quite scary.
Well, 500,000 will get you about $37,000 a year. Now, if you don't have any dramas, that'll make you pretty comfortable. But still, if you want to go for an overseas trip, if you want to do some of the things you'd like to do in retirement, that won't get you there either. Yeah,
not only that. I think it'll keep you comfortable if you have your house paid off.
That's right.
Because then if we look at the other side, if you've got to pay rent on top of, having that, not having a house, then it becomes really tight, to say the least.
Oh, by the way, if you've got any questions for Wilson, I'm sure he wouldn't mind taking them. So if any questions for him about super or anything else, 1332. I'm assuming with that super that's being lost somewhere, it's out in the stratosphere somewhere, it'd be old funds from people who have moved jobs. Would it be that sort of thing?
It's that sort of thing, yeah. And what we recommend to most people is you can find it in 3 different ways. Number one, you can go online and you can just type in there a Google or a Yahoo and just type in there Find My Super.
Right.
There's government sites that'll get it to you for free, and then there's also private sites that do all the work for you and even consolidate it for you. So it depends how much time you've got on your hand. If you haven't got much, you might as well pay for it.
Yeah, at the private site they'll charge you a fee.
They will charge you a fee.
Is it much?
Depending on what site, and depending on also on there's another way of doing it. Institutions like Westpac and other institutions have realised that with that level of money out there, they're beginning to offer services like their tellers will find the money for you and consolidate it on your behalf.
Yeah, right.
And they're doing that obviously to go for the grab of the $19 billion, which is fair enough. So if you find yourself you're part of those institutions and you sort of think, look, I don't mind them doing the work for me, you can go down that path as well.
See, when you look at those figures and think about it, if there's 6 million super accounts and 19 billion in super money, that's a lot of little accounts.
That's a lot of little accounts.
Isn't it? Yeah. So there might only be a few $100 in it, but you might as well have it as the government. So I'm assuming the government would eventually take it back over time.
When it gets to a certain amount, it sort of just gets stored away. But I think the principal thing is it's your money. You might as well have it in one account.
You might as well have it.
And if you've got it in multiple accounts, unfortunately you're paying fees and charges on multiple accounts, which isn't worth doing. You might as well consolidate it and sort of start working on it.
Yeah. And it could be a few grand.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's been as much as, look, one of my clients, when we went through his accounts, we actually found $34,000 in one of his accounts. Yeah. Okay. That's some good money to sort of be chasing up.
Okay, now if it's old super and you find it, what do you do with it? I suppose this is going to depend on how old you are, won't it? What you're able to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if you're before retirement, generally you just consolidate it into one super account. Once you consolidate it, you look for an investment strategy that you should put in place. When you work out investment strategies, there's 3 key things that I generally look at. Number one, make sure that you take into account your risk tolerance, i.e. how risk adverse you are. Number 2, always take into account how long it is to your retirement, because depending on the timing market is how risky you might be prepared to go or not go. And number 3, make sure you diversify clearly across different asset classes, particularly with the climate out there at the moment where one asset class, it's just dangerous to go into one asset class at the moment. It's better to diversify.
Why aren't we building up enough wealth, mate? Because, I can only see this being a burden on our kids and grandkids because they're going to have to pay for us as pensions through their taxation if we don't look after ourselves.
Yeah, good point. Look, I always bring it down to the same. Look, I've got this story where I sort of, about 10 years ago, I'm going down to Lismore. I'm driving up to Lismore, and I passed Grafton, and it was the last petrol station, and it was about 2 a.m. And I distinctly remember it was about halfway through, 2 a.m. I looked down to my petrol gauge and there's nothing left. Right. Yet it's the last leg of my trip. And the light's going off and I go through the worst nerves because I wonder whether there's enough petrol in that tank to take me the full way. But I only thought about it at that last minute. And I suppose that the lesson in that for me, when we relate it to superannuation, is I think many people leave it too late. Yeah. Or B, they rely on the old adage, which is the government will take care of my pension. And unfortunately, it's a tricky one.
They will, but it's not a lot of money to live on. And again, I make the point, you're really putting a burden on everybody else.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you and I'm not suggesting everyone can do it. Obviously, they can't because they haven't got the money to do it. But as much as you can would be helpful, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Not only to you, but to the country, if I can be patriotic.
Look, if you can do both, even better. You know what I mean? If you find yourself, the great thing, I think one of the good things about our system is until a certain amount, up to about $400,000, you still get the pension anyway. So you supplement in income, which is great. But try and get as much of it as you can yourself. It makes a big difference.
And it goes in stages in life, doesn't it? It's very hard to talk to a 20-year-old or a 20. See, my son's been at the same place since he started work when he was 16, and I checked his super account, and he's got over $3,000 in it from a very small income base. So I'm going to make sure if he changes jobs that he takes that with him or puts it somewhere because that's what happens, isn't it? I mean, a young person's going to change jobs. They tell us in these times a lot during their lifetime, and all of these super funds will exist. And, with the compulsory contribution, there's a fair amount of money in all of them.
Oh, look, even if they've got spare money, there's always particularly if you're over $80,000, there's always a good argument to do some salary sacrifice. Yes. Anywhere along the journey. Obviously, as long as you've got enough spare money to pay your bills, etc. Yeah. And when you look at super from that point of view, also always consider the fact that, every little bit you put in there, there's three factors to it. There's obviously the amount you put in. There's the time you leave it in there, and there's the return. Most people concentrate on the return and on the amount they put in. But funnily enough, that little magical word that they call compound interest, the component that contributes most to it is time. So the earlier you start, the better. Yeah, the more money's going to be at the end. Joe's got a question for you. Hey, Joe.
Good afternoon.
G'day.
The management fees they charge on your superannuation fund, are they the tax-deductible item?
They're not tax-deductible, but they go off the return anyway. So, indirectly they are, yes. I mean, they go straight off your return. Because any fees and charges that go off, you'll make your return minus your fees and charges. They'll be included in the return.
So, in essence, they are tax-deductible, Joe, really?
So, I can claim with my tax and do my tax return.
Yeah, that's right. So, they come off the return. So is what Wilson's saying. So, I mean, they're not really they're not a deduction per se.
But they come off.
But they are tax deductible. Yeah. All right.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, what would you say to a young family? Let's give a good example. Parents are in their early 40s, and hopefully have gone okay. Look after the mortgage, which we keep telling people to do. What would you suggest to them to put into super?
I'd say whenever possible, salary sacrifice. Yeah. I mean, it's a strange time in one's life because you're generally trying to get your kids through the school. Yeah. It's probably the most expensive time for most families, between 40 and 50. At 50, they sort of get alleviated a little bit. But notwithstanding that, take into account that any spare money that comes your way, even any little winnings, etc., that come your way, or any lump sum, put it in. Yeah. Because if you think about it logically, it's the most tax efficient structure that we have in Australia. Yeah. And it's just,
you say it to the listeners, Ian Tonkinson says it to the listeners, superannuation is actually a tax structure.
Oh, absolutely. That's really what it is. And that's why, if you consider that at maximum, you will pay 15% tax. At maximum. Yeah. Anything you make outside of super, you will pay up to your average tax rate. So let's say your average tax rate is 30-35%. You're paying almost double and a bit, taking it outside. So it's a great vehicle to really save for the time when you can't work anymore. Yeah, and I reckon some of the listeners, if they Googled Find My Super, might get a little bit of a surprise if they do their research and go, oh, look, I've got a couple of grand in this old super fund. Yeah. Absolutely.
So go get it. Yeah. Mate, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Cheers.
From your family, your money, that's Wilson Luna. It's 4:24.